Mark Kikta. I retired as a captain in the United States Navy. What led me into the United States Navy? Well, my father worked for the Navy as a civilian in Washington, D.C., and he was always coaxing me, trying to get me to go into the Navy ROTC program after I finished high school. And I applied to the Naval Academy, but wasn't selected, so I applied to the Navy ROTC program, and I was selected. And I applied to Penn State, South Carolina, and North Carolina universities. And this was in 1968. So there were a lot of buildings being burned and ROTC buildings and things. So the ROTC didn't have a good reputation. So I decided that I didn't want to go up north where all the buildings were being burned in Penn State and places. So I went south to the University of South Carolina and started my Navy career as a young midshipman at South Carolina, and absolutely loved it. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. So I did that. I had already gone to some junior college, so I only stayed there for 3 years, and then I graduated as an ensign. And I wanted to be a biologist. I wanted to be a marine biologist, actually. And so I went through college, taking all the courses, thinking I was going to be a marine biologist. And then I got the opportunity to take some flying lessons. The Navy had a program where you could go take flying lessons. They would pay for them, and they could see if you had the aptitude to fly before they sent you to flight school and spent millions of dollars on you. So I did that, and I had a great time. And my advisor said, well, let's put you in for flight school. So my eyes were only 20/25. They had to be 20/20 before you could go in. They could change later, but to go in, they had to be 20/20. And so he said, well, you're going to eat these vitamins, you're going to wear your sunglasses every day. And sure enough, I went to get my eye exam, passed it 20/20, and went into naval aviation. And so the rest is kind of history after that. I managed to go down to Pensacola, where everybody goes first, and then off to Beeville, Texas, and finished that part of my training. And I became a flight instructor. My class had some number of, I don't know, 15, 20 people graduating, but they only had 5 open seats in the fleet aircraft. So I chose to stay as a flight instructor in Beeville, Texas for a while. And got a girlfriend and had a good time, and then all of a sudden a skipper called me and said, hey, I got a seat open to go fly S3s. And so I said, well, I'll take it. And so then I went off from Pensacola to, from Beeville to North Island Naval Air Station, where they had the training squadron for S3A Vikings. And that would have been about 1976, 75, 76. And so we went to San Diego, learned to fly the S3 Viking, and then returned back to the East Coast to VS-32, where I began my career as a naval aviator flying S3s. At the time, we were on the John F. Kennedy, and made several deployments on the John F. Kennedy. Had a great time. I loved flying off the ship. I loved flying the airplane. It was just a wonderful machine. And then after I finished my 3 years in the squadron flying at VS-32, I went to the training, I guess you say, organization there at Cecil Field, Florida, called the VS Support Unit. That doesn't exist any longer, but at the time, that was the only training unit we had at Cecil Field. So we trained guys in the simulators and things like that. I did that for 3 years, and then I got picked to go back to VS-22 to be the department head in a squadron. That's a lieutenant commander job, and I went in first as the maintenance officer, and then I became the operations officer in the squadron after that. So I did my time then in VS-22, flying off the John F. Kennedy. Again, even though it's a different squadron, they had changed their wings on the ship, so now I'm back on the ship that I like as a department head. So I did that. Then I got orders to the John F. Kennedy as a ship's company person. I went there as the Assistant Air Operations Officer and later became the Air Operations Officer when my boss kind of got relieved, so somebody had to take his job, so I did. And I loved that ship. The John F. Kennedy was a really, really neat ship. And because of the name of the ship, everywhere we went was treated with kid gloves and a lot of pomp and circumstance, and just really a neat experience. So we finished the deployments on the John F. Kennedy and VS-22, and then after that, I went back to Cecil Field again as part of the wing, and I taught people how to fly the new S-3. They had made a number of modifications to the S-3A, and it became the S-3B, and I became the first flight instructor there at Cecil Field, showing people how to fly the new changes in the S-3B. So I did that at the wing. And at the wing I had other jobs, and one of the jobs I had was I was a CACO officer. A CACO officer is a Casualty Assistance Control. And we lost a gentleman in VS-22, and I was his CACO officer to his family for a while. That was a job I didn't enjoy, but that's the only one I had in the Navy in 26 years that I didn't enjoy. So I finished that, and then I'm trying to remember, the next thing I did was I got screened for command, and I went back to VS-32 as the executive officer. And by that time, VS-32 was on the USS America, and I was the executive officer, and we deployed a number of times on the USS America. The first deployment was to the Mediterranean. I do remember that one of my most memorable moments on that deployment was being told that I was going to fly to Naples, Italy, and pick up Chairman Colin Powell, who had never landed on a ship in his life. And Lieutenant Commander, I was a commander, Commander Kikta was going to go get him. So the America was over by Rota, Spain, actually just inside the Mediterranean from Rota, Spain. And I flew to Naples and landed and picked up Colin Powell, another one-star general, and the lieutenant that was helping me fly. So we picked him up and we flew him back to the America from one side of the Mediterranean to the other. Interesting enough, he was interested in antique cars, as I am. We talked about restoring cars, and then of course they asked me a lot of questions about all your junior officers. What do they think about this, or what do they think of, why do they stay in, or why do they not stay in? So he sat 12 inches from me all the way across the Mediterranean, and we had a great time. So when we landed on the ship, one of the stories that I tell a lot, actually, is the one-star general was sitting in the back seat with the lieutenant, and we were coming around the corner to land at the ship. We were about 10 seconds from touching down, and this general looks out and he goes, "Oh my gosh, look at that, isn't that neat?" And Colin Powell turns around and he says, "Not now, goddammit, Mark Kikta's flying, Mark's flying." So we're paying attention, So it was hilarious. I never heard two generals talk to each other like that. But he landed on the ship, the general did his thing with everybody, and then he got back in my airplane and I flew him back to Italy. So that was probably my most memorable experience in the squadron, doing that. So after I finished that deployment as the executive officer, then I became the commanding officer of VS-32 on America, and then came Desert Storm. So we went over, we were up in the North Atlantic, we went, I think we went into port to get ready to go on deployment, and then off we went to Desert Storm. And that was a pretty ramped up experience for everybody. And we went over there, we did really well. We sank an Iraqi patrol boat in the squadron. That was the first time an S-3 squadron had ever sank an enemy vessel. So that was pretty exciting. And we came home. I'm trying to remember exactly the date. I don't, but we came home, and everyone thought, "Oh man, Tailhook Association, they're putting on their big Tailhook reunion in Vegas," and we came home war heroes. We're going to go out there and make a big splash. And of course, everybody remembers that Tailhook did not have a good splash that year. It became pretty ugly, and they did a lot of things that they shouldn't have done. A lot of people got relieved. Thank goodness. At the last minute, they said, "You guys got something else to do. We're going to send you to the North Atlantic. You don't have time to go to Tailhook." So I think that saved all of our careers, but we went to the North Atlantic and had a good time there, and it did that. So after I finished my tour as a commanding officer, then after that I went to Washington, D.C. in the Bureau of Naval Personnel. And that really didn't scratch my itch very much. I wasn't too impressed with that job. I didn't like it. But, you know, you do a lot of things you don't like. So I managed to get that behind me. And then I went to Saratoga as the air boss. And on board Saratoga, I had the time of my life. I worked a lot of hours. I didn't sleep much. But I had 680 of the hardest working sailors in the whole wide world working for me in the air department, running the catapults, the resting gear, and all that stuff. So it was a really good experience. It was one that is my favorite command job in my Navy career, and if I had to pick all of them, which one would I go back to, it would be my job as the air boss on the Saratoga. I just loved it. And then I went to be the wing commander at Cecil Field, at the start at Cecil Field. The S-ray wing commander. We had 5 squadrons, and I got selected for command again, and so I went to Cecil Field. And it was just the beginning of them moving from Cecil Field to NAS Jacksonville. They were closing Cecil Field, so everything had to go somewhere. I think all the F-18s went to Oceana, and all the S-3s went over to NAS Jacksonville. So we moved the wing over to NAS Jacksonville. And that transition was a bit rocky. The P-3s fly with, you know, a crew of 11. We fly with a crew of 4, and they fly mostly using VHF radios, although they have UHF radios, and we don't have VHF radios. So we would get in a landing pattern, and we couldn't hear each other. We couldn't tell what he was doing because we weren't on his same frequency. So for a while, it was very confusing, very difficult transition. But we finally got everybody on the same frequency and the same radio, and we made that work. So that worked out quite well. And then, as a wing commander, I retired there after 25 years and 11 months, I think it was. And then I went to work for a defense contractor after that. But that's a summary of my Navy career.